Hey guys, it's Matt. The title of this presentation is, as of January 1st, 2025, everything in Western society that was once good has been destroyed. What's interesting is, even the man or woman on the street is starting to see what we've been seeing for 15 years. They're starting to, in a way, complain about the craziness. Of course, they will never pin what's happening to society on the, say, culprit that we point at, that we call out, which we call our spiritual adversary. But at least many are starting to see it. But unfortunately, the same old rationalizations are called forth, and people will make the same old excuses to explain the trends of what are happening, with the most famous being, Matt, that's just how a modern society evolves. When things get this large and this complex, this is the way things generally go. Interesting. Let me see if I understand this. So you and I agree that if 1 in 20 kids in high school don't really know what gender they are, or maybe they even flip-flop a few, maybe 1 in 10 in some cities, we agree that that's not good, but I see that it's by design. I see there's something here very dark, very negative, influencing society, destroying it, pulling the foundations out from under it. You think it's just kind of how a society goes normally. And you'll call me a conspiracy theorist for saying there's actually a reason for everything that's happening that you disagree with. So now we just don't have one example. We just don't have 1 in 10 or 20 kids not understanding what gender they are, which is just unfathomable 50 years ago. But now we can show you everything has been destroyed across the board, even what some would consider trivial. There hasn't been a good movie in about 20 years. There's some that are okay, but for the most part, what we knew of as the great movie experience, okay, this is one example of thousands or tens of thousands. There hasn't been a great album for 15 or 20 years. Everything is following this degenerative path. And we're one of those people, what did you call a conspiracy person for saying that there's a dark reason behind it? You think it's all normal that everything has been destroyed. Okay, well, let's go through each facet of society one by one. And you're going to say that in every one of these areas, how they've been debased, destroyed, adulterated, bastardized, ruined, you're going to say it's a coincidence, and I'm going to say it's an orchestrated plan. Let's see where the evidence holds up. You'll say coincidence.
This is a coincidence. You people. Well, here you go again, you people.
I'm going to pretty easily prove it's all by design. For those that would take the counter-argument against me. So it just makes sense that every single thing in every single facet of society has gotten worse, or in some cases exponentially worse, over the past 20 to 30 years. Every single area follows the same trend. I challenge anybody to give me an example that bucks this trend. I'm not just talking about the trivial, like the movie experience. Pick it, take a dart here. I've got thousands of Post-it notes all over the walls. I throw it, boom, it said air travel. Just pick a topic, any topic. Talk to someone in their 60s or 70s about what air travel was in, say, 1975. On Pan Am or Eastern Airlines or TWA. People actually dressed up. Taking the flight was part of the vacation, just as fun as getting to the destination. If you had to travel on business, it was a little bit more expensive because there was regulation and things like that, but it was on time and it was reliable and it was a pleasant experience. You actually got a hot meal. I think it was the only time anybody ever got a Salisbury steak ever was on a flight, but you'd peel back the foil and that meaty smell would waft up and it was nice. And then those that served you could actually call them stewardesses. It wasn't the end of the world. And for some reason, everybody on a flight asked for a ginger ale. You didn't drink a ginger ale for 5 years of your life, but on a flight, you got ginger ale, and maybe it's a little more expensive. I don't know what the point of that was. I even got it myself. You got ginger ale? I don't know. Don't ask me. You got the Salisbury steak? You got the ginger ale. So if you are, let's say, 60, 70, or 80, you call them stewardesses. But then if you slip, it's in 2008 or 2012 or 2015, you slip and say, stewardess. What'd you call me? Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm in my 60s, and we used to call you people stewardesses back in the day. I know. I'm sorry, flight attendant. What did you just call me? I said I'm sorry for calling you stewardess. Not that. You called me ma'am. Well, what's wrong with that? It's they, them. Did you ask for my proper pronoun? First it was stewardess. Now it's ma'am. When it's they, them, that's it. We're grounding this flight. We're only halfway to Denver. I'm talking to the pilot. We are grounding this flight. I'm handing you over to the TSA. Now, folks, there are no longer 3 autonomous zones as we once believed, meaning the jurisdiction, the laws, the borders have nothing to do with the country surrounding it or the country in which it's inside. It's its own entity with nothing to do with the country it's right next to or even a part of. The Vatican inside of Italy, Washington, D.C. inside the United States has nothing to do with what you would call America. We'll leave it at that. And of course, the City of London, the small jurisdiction inside the larger City of London. Well, the fourth is the TSA inside the airport. Most people have no idea the extent of their authority. Say the Philadelphia airport, about 45 minutes from here. Inside the TSA zone, whatever that is, or however it's defined, the Philadelphia police have no jurisdiction. They have no say. They can do nothing inside the TSA zone. I don't even know if federally, if the FBI would. You have to go all the way up to the director of Department of Homeland Security, whatever they do all day, playing Candy Crush or something, and then to the president, whatever that means to you. But it's its own little fiefdom. Even the police, have no say. No say. And sorry to stray. So let's get back to the point. Everything's breaking down. You have no idea what air travel was if you're under age 55 or 60. What is it today? Delays, cancelizations, everybody smashed on to get people getting on with gigantic, smelly sweatsuits. There was a guy on a flight once who was doing his fingernails and toenails. There was a clip. I'm like, ew. And people will kick their shoes off right next to their big bare feet with a giant callus and corn and putting it up in your face as you're trying to eat. I was going to say as you're trying to eat your Salisbury steak, but they don't serve that. But they still serve a little bag of peanuts, little bit. Then I want a drink. Oh, that's $18. And it's all been destroyed. Everybody loathes flying. Most people would rather take mules and donkeys across the mountains than fly today. Now, I thought we'd make one video. I'd just point out to you how everything has been destroyed. I now see this as a 400-part video that's going to last 3 or 4 years. I'm not even joking. I'm 7 or 8 minutes in. We've done 1 or 2 things when there's thousands of things that have been destroyed intentionally. But to everybody else, there's no sinister intent, and we're just one of those conspiracy people. And one example by itself, how many have we done? We've mentioned movies and we've done air travel. By itself, I guess it doesn't mean much. But then we do 50 things have broken down. 200 things have been destroyed, 400 things. At what point does your cousin or somebody you know, after maybe sitting down with them for 9 or 10 years, saying, we're on number 10,151, this has been destroyed? See, they would agree in each case. In the case we just did, they would say, yeah, I've heard the stories, Matt. I'm only 30 years old. I've heard how great air travel was. And the last couple times I flew, it was a disaster. And the flight, there were 2 inches of snow at LaGuardia, and we had to sleep in the airport. It was horrible. The toilets were overflowing. I agree. It's probably gotten a lot worse. In each case, they would agree. They're not going to sit here and say Casablanca and Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz and then Star Wars from 1977 is not as good as what do they got today? It was what the hell was that the other night that came on? It was Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys 3 or something. Nobody would agree that in every single example they're going to agree with us. They're going to say yes, it's worse. But then as we go on example 5,000, they're going to say, well, that's just what happens. It's just a coincidence. It's totally bizarre, people. At what point is the destruction of everything, the ruination of everything around us, no longer a coincidence? This is a horrible example, but it's kind of funny. I'm going to say it. I'm not going to re-record. It popped it, re-record, even recorded yet. Popped into my head. What if your best friend, telling a story, every single night of the week, a squirrel throws itself off his roof? Splat! Or some get stuck on the fence, impaled every night, a squirrel. You say, you think that's normal? Well, I think that's what happens sometimes, Matt. So how long has this been going on? Well, for the past 20 years, every night a squirrel has thrown itself off my roof. And about once a week, they're impaled on your fence. Yeah, but that's normal. That's okay. At what point is the craziness no longer normal? Meaning, there's something really dark here that not that we have to focus on and be negative for no reason, that we have to put our armor on and protect ourselves from. Guys, since we were talking about the TSA, I think I might have mentioned this before. 2 minutes or less, I've got to tell you this story about what really happened. I was working at one point about 20 years ago for an air medevac evacuation company. They life flight people out of countries where they can't be operated on to get them back to the U.S. or whatever. They started a security arm. It was smoke and mirrors to protect important expatriates or whatever, CEOs working in foreign countries. It was total BS. They had this product, but they didn't have anything built. There was no infrastructure. So just to make it look good, they hired lieutenant colonels. It's always like in special forces and black ops and dark ops, it's always a lieutenant colonel. Right? So they had this guy and that guy, and they all had this military resume, and they would just go around and talk to clients about the new product. It was total bullshit. Anyway, this dude was a total asshole. I forget his name, but I wouldn't mention it anyway. So this guy on a Wednesday morning comes barging back into the office, and he's loud and boisterous, and you hear things like, "I'm never flying to Boston Logan again. Don't ever ask me to do a meeting in Boston." He's bitching, complaining, and you kind of hear like, what's he talking about? Anyway, to make a long story short, he was coming back from a seminar. He was a seminar on the T-ism threat to Americans in the Middle East, etc. He's coming back through Boston Logan. He's going through security. Of course, he's a big cheese. I'm lieutenant colonel, this and that. Again, the point is the TSA, that's their own castle and keep. Nobody has any authority but them. Doesn't matter if you're a 4-star general, means nothing. Doesn't matter if you're FBI, local police, state police. They have zero jurisdiction. So he has, I don't know, it's like a pocket knife or something on his keychain. And they're like confiscating it, and he's making a big deal out of it. I guess it's going to go a minute longer than I expected. Well, give me that. You know who I am? They don't give a shit who you are. I'm ex-lieutenant colonel, this and that. That's my pocket knife that I got in Vietnam. Or I don't know where he got it, but it had some emotional attachment to it. And the more, instead of being rational and saying, let's talk about this. Here's who I am. I respect you. He's making a big stink, trying to throw his weight around. See, just 2 years in after the 7-Eleven job application, most people, even in military people, didn't realize what the TSA is, how much power they have inside their own little borders. So he starts, it never works anyway, vinegar, right? Screaming and yelling or making a big stink. Well, what do? They just double down on the harassment. I'm sure we all know this by now. Pootie Tang Award, right? But even this dumbass knows it by now. But they just, step aside, sir. You can't do that to me. Again, just didn't realize. Step aside, sir. And then here they come, and almost physically pushing him into, the strip search room because he's making a big stink. Anyway, in the strip search room, the little room, they close the door behind him. They open up the briefcase, and what's in the briefcase? All this information on the jihad, and because that's his presentation on on the 7-foot Arab and the cave networks, and he's got this stuff so that these people at TSA, they don't know. They're freaked out thinking this guy's in some network or something. So that freaks them out even more. In addition to just bitching and complaining, all these brochures and information on Al Qaeda, Daesh, and Al Qaeda, and the jihad, all this crap is in his book bags, and he's taken it. He brought it back from the seminar. Well, then they start stripping him down. I heard him tell the story. I got part of it, whatever. They made him take his clothes off. I mean, oh my gosh, did he? He realized, though, pretty soon that he could have called his best friend, who was an active general in the military, or an admiral in the Navy. They have no authority. Now, I'm sure you guys know that about the TSA, but I had to tell you that story. Pam learned her lesson like in 2007 or 2008, not with the TSA. It was a regular airport worker. She asked some directions or something. about security or how to. It was a regular airport worker, I think they're on strike in Philadelphia, and the person, they just don't give a crap about anything. They just ignored Pam. It was really rude, but you don't mess. Even with the regular airport people, you don't mess with them. So Pam pauses and says, "Do you speak?" And I went, "Oh my God." Now Pam is not like Pam. She's usually very nice, and it was this person completely blew her off. But do you speak? I said, "Oh my God, we're not going to get on the flight." Because they work with the TSA. All she has to do is go over to her friend over there and say, "You point this one out." I mean, it didn't get to that. We were able to board our flight. So back to what I said earlier, I thought I would do one video about every single thing that's been destroyed, when now this is turning into So It's Destroyed series. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty and the details of each facet of society that's been destroyed, and sharing with you people who are 25 or 30 or 35 years old what the world once was. In this case, we're talking about air travel, but you could also apply it to any form of transportation, at least in the United States. Think about the horrible and wretched Amtrak rail. How horrible is that? Go watch Catch Me If You Can. It gives you a great flavor of what the Pan Am or the old flying experience was to a degree in the 60s and 70s. Leonardo DiCaprio, Da Vinci, Catch Me If You Can. Get a little bit of a flavor. And the nice meals and the flying, and it was on time, and people were friendly. But what exists today, just another facet of the horrible flying experience, is the flight attendants on power trips. They probably learned that from their friends at the TSA. Well, you say one thing a little wrong or a little innuendo or something, the flight attendant, now they may not ground the flight in Dubuque. They might not say, "We're taking this plane down." They might get you to Denver or whatever. But when that plane lands, all the authorities will be waiting for your ass. It's a, "Ladies and gentlemen, we had a passenger who was offensive to one of the flight attendants, calling that flight attendant not just stewardess and not the they-them pronoun that they preferred. We have the authorities needing to come on the plane to take away the unruly passenger. We apologize for the inconvenience, and thank you for flying United Airlines." So this video is certainly not going the way I intended. We've now completed example number 1 of 10,000 left to go of a facet of society and culture that has been completely destroyed and bastardized. The flying experience, which we will extend to all of travel. Not going to do a separate segment on the horrible, wretched Amtrak and the smell of vomit as you board those trains. Matt, I think some of the trolls may have been correct about you. You're very negative. I don't think I want to be here anymore. The frequency's lowering. So let me get this straight. If there's something organized against us, we should pretend it doesn't exist and not call it out, not look at its tactics, what it's currently doing. Just pretend, just sing Kumbaya around the campfire and pretend it doesn't exist. Yeah, it can get negative. Because what the thing that's organized against us does isn't really positive, okay? But we can use it to strengthen our own armor, see through the trick, etc. Again, one of the main reasons for this video is to point out the fundamental difference between you and me and your cousin or your best friend or the guy down the street in terms of how we or they would explain why this is all happening. Why the pendulum only swings in one direction. Is something organized and plotting against society and against culture of which they know you and I need to participate? Or is it just all random? It's just a coincidence that everything gets worse. If your sample size is 4 things, nobody can see it. If your sample size is 10 things, few people can see it. But when the sample size gets to be about 1,000 things, and all 1,000 things have gotten worse than what it was 10 or 15 or 50 years ago, then it proves definitively there's something organized against us. A Christian calls it Satan. I call it something different. Either way, there's something here that's organized to work against us. Matt, regarding air travel, if we're still talking about that, it is very good in one area, and it's the most important area. Well, what's that? Survival. Okay, you can talk all you want that you only get your bag of peanuts and you don't get no Salisbury steak, and the person next to you has been wearing the same sweatsuit for 2 weeks and it just reeks. It's full of sweat and grease. You can talk about all that you want, but you know what the most important thing is? Getting there alive, survival. Well, that's true. I can't argue that. I think it's pushing 250 million flights without a major incident to travelers or passengers. About 250 million to 300 million without any sort of real incident with, say, a crash where people die. And, somebody trying to tell me something? Yeah, yesterday, like I have no idea. A DHL flight crashed in Lithuania. DHL is like FedEx, I think, or UPS of Europe. Oh, yeah, we're all wrong, I guess, what we said about air travel. A DHL cargo plane full of envelopes and letters crashed in Lithuania. Oh, that destroys my whole theory. Yeah, there wasn't any real consciousness or enough real consciousness on board to believe the air travel was completely safe to make the plane or assist the plane to fly completely safe. The people on board believe it because that's been the mantra for 40 years. You know how safe flying is? It's safer than crossing the street. Your grandparents taught us this from the day we were this, and that the Knottnilk uses this. They don't care about safety, of course. The Knottnilk cares about influencing reality and ways to influence reality. Maybe it's a giant test. They've told the little kid since 1970 or 65 how safe air travel is. Everybody grows up believing it. The real consciousness on board assists the plane in not crashing. So what was on board the DHL? Nothing but envelopes. AI isn't real consciousness. If those envelopes contain little microchips, they didn't have the real. Maybe it did really crash in Lithuania, but Matt, Lithuania, nobody can tell. Nobody can go out there and confirm it. That's another factor. But if it did crash, well, maybe it did. There was no real consciousness on board, just the AI bot flying it. I guess we're just going to keep going with travel and transportation stuff. I actually believed in one video I'd break down every single facet of society that's been destroyed. What was I thinking? This could take decades. I'm 21 minutes in. There's thousands of examples of things that have been destroyed that were once pretty darn good 30 or 40 years ago, and I'm only on example number 1. So let's just keep doing it then. Let's stick with transportation. I'm sure there's a lot of other elements that have been completely destroyed. Now, I can't talk about flying or air travel for more than a minute in a conspiratorial tone without the Malaysia Airlines MH370 popping into my head. The disappearance in 2014, the mysterious disappearance of MH370. Yeah, Matt, what's your opinion of what happened there? I'll give you my opinion. Nothing. Absolutely. What you mean nothing? Nothing happened. Nothing, honey. Well, they searched for the wreck of all these helicopters, and there was fleets of boats looking for the... Well, yeah, they're searching for the wreckage. There's no wreckage because nothing took off. What would you think I meant? Of course. Why do we assume anything took off? Nothing took off, of course. I actually just took a minute to see when the TV show Lost ended compared to the date of MH370. MH370 2014. The last episode of Lost 2010. I thought they'd put a little closer. I know they wouldn't put it on the exact date. They're capable of that, though, and the people are capable of believing it, but I thought it was a little bit closer than that. They're capable of pulling stunts like that. So I don't think it has too much to do with the TV show Lost. And no, the people that were pouring into the airport, the relatives and the family members of the, you could call the victims. No. What did Triple X in the diner scene say? Vin Diesel, and he says, and the performances. I can't do Vin Diesel. His voice is just too deep. And the performances were terrible. That sounded a little bit more like him. Those going through the airport, remember? Screaming hysterical one after the other. Screaming hysterical. And the performances were terrible. Guys, we've talked about the rule of opposites many times, but there are many rules that Knottnilk Dark Reality needs to adhere to. There are rules on the Asshole Dark. One is called the rule of news. If there's a news headline that dominates the world news for several days, then that news story is in no way legitimate. It could be completely cake in a lake. It could be cooked up. That doesn't mean there's not real destruction or not real death, but the circumstances are not what's advertised or not what's described. You could go right back to World War II. That dominated the news, right? The reasons for the war. Who put whom into power? Who played both sides with IBM and AT&T and all the American companies like Ford providing or building up the German war machine? The reason for it, of course, is not what's presented. It's all false. If it dominates the news, there's no possible way what the news is saying is even half legitimate. That rule is never violated. What happened on MH370? For 4 or 5 days in a row, it was the only basically news story 24 hours a day on every outlet everywhere in the world. With that much attention, there's no possible way it's legitimate. The rule of news, once again, take the inverse. A point of clarification, because people will misconstrue this, take 2001 and the 7-Eleven job application. What I'm saying here, the rule of news, it doesn't mean it's cake in a lake, it's all cooked up. I mean, there can be legitimacy, but what's behind it, the reason or as it's explained, is not legitimate. There's a lot that happened on the 7-Eleven job application in 2001, a whole lot. It happened, but who was behind it? That's all illegitimate. Okay, it's not that it's all fake. Okay, let's be clear on that. So maybe I go too far, or I'm making mistakes in the application of this rule of news, but I'm going to show you in this example how far I take it at this point. The rule of news, meaning in general, if the story is just gigantic, to me, this story is not legitimate. And I don't know if there's any exceptions to that, but maybe I've lost it a bit. Maybe I'm going too far. Look at, what was his name? The Ted Kaczynski, right? The story was so big, Matt, you would say just because it was such a big story and everybody, and also the legend of it is carried through time, like a Humpty Dumpty or a stuffed Lenin to a degree. The legend of it is still known by 30-year-olds today, or where it shouldn't be carried through time. It wasn't that big of a deal. That means everything points to the fact that was just whatever you call cake in a lake, call whatever you want. It's completely contrived. So where I am with this rule of news in 2024, I think I've probably taken to it to a degree where many of you even here, many even of the old guard, will disagree with how far I've taken this. And this will shock some of you. Let's take a famous story about a serial killer, a big news story, Jeffrey Dahmer. The fact that everybody knows the story. The fact that every generation knows it's carried through time, books, movies. You know what I think? Yeah, I'm not trying to piss anybody off. I do take it that far. I think there are gang members in Los Angeles that have killed many, 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 many more. You'll never know their name because it's completely real, legitimate. The Bloods, the Crips, or whatever happened somewhere. When the legend of something is so big, so well known, decade after decade, generation after generation, books, movies, Hallmark specials before Christmas, I'm sorry, it's not milk to me. I don't buy it. Now, hey, maybe in this case or in some other cases, I've gone too far. But in general, I believe this rule it very much applies. I believe a false world continuously gives itself away almost by rule because it has to give itself away. And when things cross over a certain threshold, to me, that is, in some way, we can't really understand its reality revealing itself or showing itself to me. There are thousands of ways that reality needs to reveal itself to those getting to the point where we are, that are starting to notice, that are starting to learn things about themselves, that potentially are done with this sort of material experience. It's the truck and tractor pull for us. That's the clown show, the breakdown, the ridiculousness of how it's getting to us off the ship and off the frequency versus those on the ship. The craziness is all normal to those on the ship. In fact, they realign themselves to the radio station where there's nothing strange at all, even though earlier on I remember mentioning in this video, and I still believe that, a lot of people generally are starting to question how strange things are getting. Maybe the not milk through its sampling and will need to pull back a bit. I mean, I have a relative that's a good example. Like every time I talk, she's like, this is getting so strange. Now, she doesn't want to hear my theories. She doesn't want to hear about conspiracy and not milk and a dark entity that's a spiritual block. They don't want to hear that horse shit. But nevertheless, at the very base level, I would agree with them and many that things are just really, really weird. Of course, they don't. I'd like to offer up my explanation, which they don't buy, but at least there's a little bit of agreement. If you're completely on the ship of fools on the frequency, then it's not. I kind of take back what I said at the opening of this video. It's just normal. It's not weird at all. You're vibrating with it. So for the comments, give me exceptions or violations to this rule of news. Matt, this story over here dominated the local and world news for 2 or 3 days. It was just a gigantic story, and every bit of it was real. Every bit of it was legitimate. Do we have anything that will buck the trend? I don't know. I'll look to your comments. So per the truck and tractor pull, where everything has to get crazier, everything has to slide towards the clown show, towards the insane. The truck and tractor pull, as the truck pulls, it gets heavier and heavier because of the physics. See, reality is doing this because that's the way the reality was designed. It's in general a gigantic wake-up tool. It's designed this way for certain people that are at certain levels to start to reject it and then do what they need to do for themselves. So you have 3 levels or 3 different perspectives. The perspective of those on the ship of fools, well, everything's just normal. That's just the way it is, Matt. I mean, you can't see past 1 inch of it. The first grade truth or the third grade truth or the 5th grade truth or whatever, that they see things are completely going down the tubes and everything's breaking down. Everything's being destroyed. And one of the main themes of this video. But that's because this dark force we talk about, even you call it not milk, Matt, continues to take bites it shouldn't be taking. The hijack gets worse. Its encroachment gets worse. I partially agree with that, but I'd take it a step further that say it's designed to be the truck and tractor pull. It's designed for this thing here to take bigger and bigger bites, to make it more and more ridiculous, so it wakes more and more people up that are ready to be woken up. To me, and this is a disagreement to this day with many people here, it is all by design. I understand many of you disagree with that. We'll continue to debate it. Thanks for listening.